Hello there and welcome back to another review. Today I thought we'd have a look at the 1919 vehicle Die Hard 2, otherwise known as Die Harder, directed by Renny, Harlin and obviously starring Bruce Willis in the lead role, returning as Detective John McClane. It was actually written by two people. One of the writers actually being Stephen E. D'Souza. I think that's how you pronounce his name, like I mentioned in my Street Fighter review. He was the one who directed Street Fighter the movie with Van Damme, so a little bit of trivia for you there. Some people like this film, some people don't. Some people are very divided on this film. I like it personally. I think it's a worthy sequel sort of in its own right. Obviously the first Die Hard had a lot to live up to there. It did sort of, even though like I said in my review, it was very mixed reviews at the time. I think it done a lot better than people thought it was going to. And like I said, obviously now it's regarded to be a classic, one of the all-time action greats. So Die Hard 2 sort of had a lot to live up to. They had, not raise their game, but they just had to do something interesting with John McClane and just make a worthy sequel. And I think in many ways they did that. As I say, I know a lot of people are not fans of this film, but I am. I think I do really enjoy this film. So we'll be getting into Die Hard 2 today. Just, what I like about it, what I don't like about it, what works, what doesn't work. So what I like about this film as well, the film basically starts right away. There's no sort of long credit sequence, long montage at the beginning, no sort of like reconnecting you. They, like with John McClane, they do that gradually sort of as the film progresses. It basically says Die Hard 2 and then the film begins. There's, like I say, there's no like long opening credits, in the movie. There's at the start of the film, there's no long sort of montage that you got to sit through before the whole film starts or anything like that. So that I do like, that the film just begins instantly straight away. It just gets straight into it. And with John McClane, basically he's having his car towed outside the airport where he's going to meet his wife like when she lands. Meanwhile, at the same time, corrupt General Esperanza, played by Franco Nero, is on his way to the US basically for trial, basically. He's like a drug lord, dictator, you get the idea. And Colonel William Stewart, played by William Sadler, and his crew believe in his cause. They've got his back in, they're in support of him, and they're basically going to free him, and it's up to John McClane to stop them. That's basically the premise of the film. Evil dictator, a crew of terrorists want to free him when he lands, and John McClane just stumbles upon their plan and, basically has to foil their plan and just stop them doing what they're going to do. As mentioned, the film, it doesn't start slowly at all. I mean, there's no long build up to McClane at home, with him sort of at home reconnecting us with John and Holly. It just sort of begins right away, and I love that. As soon as he's getting his car towed, you're basically familiar with the character. It introduces you to John. Worth mentioning that Robert Patrick and John Leguizamo play two of the terrorists in this before they were sort of quote unquote sort of famous, Robert Patrick especially with T2. It does follow some of the same beats as the first film. For example, like the villain is not dumb, much like Hans Gruber in the first film, very precise, a strategist, not sort of like a cliche sort of Bond villain whose plans sort of don't always make sense, or logical sense anyway. Although the methods are a bit different here though. He's very similar in many ways to sort of how Hans Gruber is, sort of very calculated. Everything's mapped out and planned. These terrorists are not just doing anything sort of just winging it. They're not causing mass chaos just for the sake of it. They're doing it. They have a plan. They know what they're going to do. It makes sense that of all the people in the airport, it just always makes sense that John is the only one who notices two guys looking suspicious. It's only John that notices it, You've got these two guys looking really sus at a table, sort of how the film begins, where John spots them sort of with this briefcase, looking a bit iffy, looking a bit suspicious. And sort of out all the people there, out of everyone in that airport, bearing in mind, like I say, it's Christmas Eve, it's chaotic anyway, but it's just so convenient that John's the only one who spots them. He does try to warn the airport police. They obviously don't want to know. They're like, yeah, whatever McClane. So he follows them to the luggage room at the start. And of course we have the classic fighting on a conveyor belt scene where one of the guys gets chewed up. He's on a conveyor belt. He can't break free. He gets chewed up, mangled to pieces. You do get a lot of that, the McClane quips in this and one-liners, though I would say they aren't maybe as memorable as the first film. And I think the script in certain places does lack that sort of wit and sharpness that the original had. It's not to say there isn't that classic sort of John McClane lines in this, the John McClane sort of, like I say, just his wisecracking dialogue. It's not to say the film doesn't have that, but just it, in certain sense, it's just not kind of as witty and as sharp as like the first film was. Like I say, that isn't to say there aren't memorable quotes. Like, for example, supposed to stay in your seat until the plane reaches the terminal. Or my favourite one, what sets off a metal detector first, lead in your ass or the shit in your brains. Love that one. Great John line. Just some of them are a bit cheesy in this film. I think this film definitely it does border on a bit of cheese in some places. Like when he contacts Al from like the first film, who has like a brief cameo in this film. And like John says, I've just got one of them feelings. And he says, well, when you get them feelings, insurance companies go bankrupt. And it's like, I mean, some people might like that line. I thought it was a bit sort of cheesy, tacky there. But, or when the police chief at the end says, let's kick ass, it's like, it just borders on cheese. I'm not saying it is cheesy, but it just is a bit, in like just little bits there. It's nice having the terrorists not just after money as well. That's another thing I like about this film. The terrorists aren't just after money. It's not like just a ransom or anything like that. Or, it's not a stereotypical sort of plot device that we're getting here. Like they want something different. It's more of a rescue operation for the terrorists in this film. I mean, that was something that is a bit different. I will say another thing, like if you aren't necessarily a good flyer before like you see this film, then you probably won't be after watching this. Like if you've got a fear of flying or a phobia of sort of aircrafts, being in an airplane or anything like that, I really do not think this film is going to make you feel any better about it. Believe me, I really do not think this film is going to make you feel any better about air travel if you have phobias or you're scared of it anyway. You're not going to feel any better after the movie. And another thing with this film as well, regarding the hostages and the people whose lives are at stake, you actually feel sorry for the people in the planes, because in the first film, like the hostages knew they were hostages. They knew, like they met Alan Rickman. They knew they could see the danger in front of them. In this one, they have no idea, and they're like for a majority of the film, the passengers, the hostages who have no idea they're sort of hostages, they're in the dark about what's going on. I mean, they do find out eventually, but they don't. The whole time they're sort of, they assume everything's fine. They've just been told they can't land yet, so they're just sort of circling. It's not, they have no idea what is going on the ground below and the reason why they can't sort of land. So that is a different dynamic there as well. Like I say, with the first film, the hostages being totally aware what's going on. In this one, not so much. Like I say, properly in the dark regarding, like I say, what's at stake, what's going on. And as well, I mean, a lot of people had a problem with the setting with this film. I felt, like where, the first one was quite confined and just set in like one building. A lot of people had a problem with this being set in like an airport. I think the airport setting works. I think the airport setting does work because it's sort of confined without being confined, if that makes sense. Like where it is in an airport, it does still allow McClane to sort of get outside and to see McClane sort of outside a building and to push him outside a little bit. But at the same time, he is still on sort of the same confined space. He is still within sort of the airport territory. So I think the airport does work. As I say, it's sort of confined without being confined, if that makes sense. There are a few little things with this film, like McClane, I know this happens in so many action films, I mean, too many to count, but McClane's always got a new clip for his gun. He's always got a new clip. The first film, he's really sort of scavenging for what he can find. Like he'll knock a guy out or kill a guy, he'll take his walkie-talkie, he'll take his ammo, he'll take his machine gun, he'll sort of, it's like survival in the first film. Here, he's always got a clip for his gun. That's one thing I noticed, like he's just always got a spare clip. As I say, the first film is sort of the opposite to that, because he's sort of really sort of hunting around for what he can find, what's going to help him in this, like let's say, this crisis, what's going to get him through. and like with the general as well, just General Esperanza, there's a few, like, I don't know if anybody, like the rest of you, have ever noticed this. There is so much luck dependent upon their plan actually working in this film. He's on the plane, he's sort of handcuffed and everything, and there's two people flying the plane, and there's this guard in the back sort of watching him, keeping an eye on him. He says, look, can you loosen these chains? It's uncomfortable. The guy's like, I can't do that, General. And then he says, okay, can you let me, can I have a cigar, just sort of one last smoke, something like that. And the guy's like, okay then. So he goes to light the cigar. And so he's tried two things there. First, he could, like I say, tried, can you loosen them? He's not going to buy that, right? Well, can I have a cigar? The guy goes for that. So there's two, like, my 2 points are, the whole plan was like dependent on the fact the general could overcome this soldier who was like looking after him. And why would they just have one guy? And if you watch that scene again, when he asks for the light, and he ends up like sort of strangling this guy because this guy's got close to him to sort of light the cigar. This goes on for about 40 minutes. So you see the guy like say, like, the general, can I have a cigar? And then literally 45 minutes of the film goes by, and then you cut back to that. So the whole time, like, was he being strangled like the whole time? As I say, it's just a couple of things there. I thought surely one thing, they'd probably have more than one guy watching him in the back, just more than one like young guy watching him. And when you're so close to landing, I mean, would you sort of like, why should you cave into what the general wants? But again, I know it's just a plot device, but if you look at it, when he gets the cigar, it takes him so long to sort of overcome and just strangle this guy so he could sort of take control of the plane. Just things I noticed here and there. I mean, like I say, there might be something I'm missing completely, but to me, it just seemed like if that guy was being strangled for 40 minutes. But I say the whole of their plan was so dependent upon the general actually being able to get out of his cuffs and being able to get to the cockpit. Like, there was so much I mean, if that guy didn't get anywhere near him and didn't light his cigar for him or whatever, what would he have done? Like, seriously, what would have happened there? Because he, I just don't understand. There was so much dependent upon like luck with that. There are some nice touches here and there with this film, as I say. It's not all bad news. That's just a little plot thing I noticed. Please don't think I'm criticising this film. It's just little things I noticed in regards to sort of the plot and the pacing, like, what was going on the whole time. We get to see John, have a chase sequence as well, which we didn't get in the first film. We actually get to see John like take part in like a chase sequence, which obviously that's basically all of Die Hard with a Vengeance is just sort of one long chase. But here, even though he's on like a skidoo, a snowmobile, we do get to see John sort of pursue some criminals. We do get more of a scope with the action scenes, which is good. And like I say, the snow and the airport setting, I think that does work. The way he kills the terrorist at the end with like the plane and the petrol, I think that was pretty awesome. Whether it's like actually realistic that could happen, I don't know, but it works. It looks awesome on camera, and when he says yippee-ki-yay, that's sort of what you've been waiting the whole film for him to say, and he says it, and the way he just blows up the plane and it creates like a landing light for the other planes. I thought that was quite cool. I think that worked. I think where the film sort of lacks certain bits, I think it's like it does miss out on like the bromance that John and Elle had going on, just with like them two having a conversation throughout the first film, like with John trying to just confide in Elle and just how he's feeling and what's going on and what's going through his head. I think in this film, I think that misses out on that. I think it's sort of lacking. You got to know a lot more about McClane in the first film because of that, and the dialogue and the conversation he had with Elle. Because like I mentioned in my review for Dard, it gives the character a lot of heart. It gives the character a lot more substance. Here, he's slowly turning into like sort of that Rambo-esque type character. Like he doesn't seem as phased by like the terrorists in this film, but I suppose to compensate for that, when he sort of dealt with it before, it's sort of, he's seen it all before. He's been through that hostage situation, that crisis, so he can sort of mentally sort of not prepare himself, but he knows sort of like he's been here before, all right, different things are at stake, but it's sort of familiar territory for him. There's one scene as well where McClane stabs someone in the eye with like an icicle, and I was expecting like some smart Alec sort of comment or like a James Bond-esque type thing. I mean, he literally stabs this guy right in the eye with this icicle, and I was expecting some sort of really clever, just like I say, a clever quip or just a little remark from McClane after he does it, but we don't get nothing. I thought it was such a wasted opportunity there after he like stabs this guy. I thought that is just begging for like just a little comment or just a little thing to just inject a tiny bit of humour like the first one did, just injecting a little bit of humour here and there. And this film does have humour bits in it, don't get me wrong, it's not all straight and dark the whole time. As I say, I do like Die Hard 2, and I think it's a very, very good sequel, and this isn't me ripping it apart or just disregarding the film, because I think it's a really good sequel. Out of all the Die Hards, it's the one that no matter how much I see, I can like sort of always watch it again. It's like the first film sort of imprinted in my memory. Die Hard 2, no matter how many times I've seen it, I can sort of always watch it again every 6 months or so, because I still can't get my head around it, but I just like this film. It doesn't necessarily stick out in your head as much, this film, but it's a very good sequel nonetheless. I just think some of the beats are missing that were in the first film, that made the first one so great, more in regards to sort of the character and some of the dialogue. But I still think, as I say, it's a worthy sequel and a very underappreciated sequel to boot. It still holds your attention. It still, it still works. I think it's, like I say, as a sequel to Die Hard, I think they've done the best they could, and I think Renny Harlin does a really good job. Bruce is really good in this as well. I mean, everybody does their role perfectly. It's a really good sequel. It's just, in my opinion, maybe just not as polished and like as quick-witted as the first one. But if you haven't seen Die Hard 2, please check it out, because it's a really good sequel.